If you use English at work, you need to know these 5 words. But not only do you need to know them, you need to be comfortable enough to use them. And you need to make sure you're using them correctly. Don't worry, you're in good hands. We're going to dive deep into each of these 5 terms. And at the end of the video, I'll give you a quiz to make sure you've locked in learning. Let's jump in. Aligned means to be in agreement or working towards the same goal or sharing the same understanding of something. So you come out of a meeting and say, I'm not sure the client's very interested in this addition we're adding to the project. Yeah, I'm aligned with you on that, meaning I have the same understanding. I feel the same way. I'm in agreement with you. And this means we're aligned. Or aligned, again, it doesn't have to always be in 100% agreement. It can be. We're aligned on the details. We're in agreement on the details. However, it could be maybe some details are a little different. However, we're working towards the same goal. So we're aligned on this project. So we're aligned on our targets. We may have some differences of opinion in smaller details, but we're aligned and focused on the same goal. Let me give you some examples here. What I want to check that we're aligned before we meet with the client. Okay, so we're going to meet with the client to talk about timelines. Well, before you walk in to meet with a client, meet with the people who you work with, your colleagues, and make sure you're in agreement. You're working towards the same goal. You completely have the same understanding of the goal of that meeting or what you need to come out of that meeting, or you're in agreement, you're aligned on what you need the client to do for that meeting or what the importance is of that meeting. Or once leadership is aligned with this next project, we can begin implementation. So we're waiting for leadership to be aligned. Once leadership is aligned, meaning in agreement, working towards the same goal, having the same understanding of the importance of this project, we can begin implementation. So aligned is key, incredibly important. Hopefully you do feel comfortable now using this. I do hear some mistakes that students make quite often with aligned, and this is choosing the wrong preposition. Prepositions are very tricky, especially at your level. If you're watching this video, you're going to be upper intermediate to advanced level in English. And we have this thing in English called dependent prepositions. And these are just prepositions that attach themselves to verbs, nouns, and adjectives. There are thousands of them, and there are no rules. This is very, very tricky. So when we are aligned, we're aligned on a decision. We're aligned on a goal. So I hear students saying, are we aligned about this decision? Are we aligned about this project? No, that's incorrect. You're aligned on something. So not just aligned, we're aligned on this decision. We're aligned on this project. We're aligned on this goal. Now, when you talk about being aligned with a person, this is with, not to. So I'm not aligned to the client is incorrect. I'm not aligned with the client. Or yes, I'm aligned with the finance department. We can talk about a department as a group of people. So if it's a person, you're aligned with them. If it's a decision, a thing, a goal, a target, you're aligned on that. Next one here is flag. And flag, you probably know flag as the noun, your nation's flag. However, this is a verb, and you flag something. To flag something means you're going to point out, you're going to identify a problem. Usually, it's almost always negative if you flag something, a risk, a concern, an important detail, a mistake. So if you flag something, you identify or point out or highlight an issue, a problem, a risk, something critical. This is incredibly important. So I just want to flag a couple issues I see here in the contract. Okay, so you're looking at a contract, you see some discrepancies with dates. You see timelines are not doable. Doable means you're able to do them. If you don't know that word, doable is a great word to add to your vocabulary. So I want to flag some things in the contract. So flag means I want to bring them up, point out, raise these issues as concerns and talk about them. Or can you flag any risks before we submit the proposal? So you have a big meeting, you want to submit a proposal, maybe for some funding, and you're asking your finance department to, can you flag any risks? Can you identify, point out any risks that we may have? Or we had a meeting and Bob flagged that the client hadn't approved the final decision. So there's a meeting, you're moving forward with production, and then Bob goes, oh, I met with the client. They did not approve the last draft that we did, or that did not approve the final decision. So he flagged that the client had not done something. So you can flag something. You can flag a situation, flag a mistake, flag an error, flag a risk, or flag a concern. I do hear some mistakes that students use here. And here, when you flag something in English, you just say, I want to flag an issue. I want to flag a problem. I want to flag a risk. You don't need to add the person or an extra preposition. So you wouldn't say, I want to flag you a problem. I want to flag the client a problem. No, you just go, I want to flag the problem. I want to flag the issue. So you don't even have to talk about who you're speaking with. And also, you don't need to add any prepositions there. You don't need to say, I was in the meeting and I flagged about the delay. No, you flagged the delay. So you don't need a preposition. You don't need to add the person who you're raising the concern with, who you're flagging something to. Okay, number 3 here is scope. And scope is a noun. And scope describes the limits, the size of something. It could be responsibilities that you have on a project, or responsibilities of a company or a department, or boundaries of a project or a task. So scope is a really big word. So the limits of something. We need to make sure we keep this within scope. Okay, within the limits of what we're able to do. Don't take on more work than you're able to perform, than you're able to do. So keep it within limits, keep it within the scope. Or what's the scope of the project, meaning size. So the scope of the project is pretty big. We need to bring in more people. Bring in means hire. Or this is a very doable scope. Doable means manageable. If you don't know that word, it's a fantastic adjective. So this is a very doable scope, meaning the size is not too big. So the scope, it's big, small, medium, doable. This is what it means. Scope can also be responsibilities. So what's the scope of the position you're offering me? What's the scope of this project? Meaning, what are my responsibilities which I need to perform, which I need to do for this project? So, look, we're looking at limits, size, responsibilities. And again, kind of like limits, scope is also boundaries of a project or a task. So you have your financial boundaries. You have your resource, meaning staff and people, boundaries. You have your time boundaries. You have your legal boundaries. You could always, boundaries meaning like a border, your limitations which you cannot overflow. So that's also the scope. So scope is incredibly useful. If you don't, I'm sure you understand the word scope if you're already working in business, but you need to be comfortable using it. So we need to define the scope of the project before we start. So define the scope of the project, how big the project is. What are our limitations? What are our responsibilities? So really define that. Or if something is outside the scope, so a client comes to you with a request that's not within the agreement, that's not within the scope of the contract. So it's something that's completely outside that. It's outside the scope, outside the original scope, outside the project scope. So sorry, your request is outside the scope of the project. Your request is outside the scope of what I'm able to perform, of my responsibilities. So it's outside that kind of direct limitation that we've aligned for this project. Can we clearly understand the scope of the role of this new team member? So you bring a new team member in, but they're just helping in different departments. Well, we need to clarify or clearly define the scope of their responsibilities. So what are their responsibilities? That is scope. Now, scope, I do hear a lot of students making some mistakes with scope. If something is in scope or within your scope, that's good. If something is outside the scope, we do not say out of scope. It's outside the scope. So you can't say this is out of the scope or out of the scope of the contract. No, this is outside the scope of the project. Think about scope as in boundaries, limitations, like a fence around the work you're doing. So you'd say outside, not out of. And another mistake I hear quite often is we need to scope the project clearly. Well, scope is not a verb. It's not a verb, it's a noun. So we need to define the scope. We need to understand the scope. We need to rework the scope. So scope is a noun. Okay, this next one is beautiful business English. And because it's so emotive, there's so many emotions involved here. Take ownership of. Take ownership of something. So just like if you were to buy a car and now the car is yours, you took ownership of the car. It's your responsibility. It's your car. You need to care for it. You need to use it. You need to work with it. You need to maintain it. Just like you adopt a dog from a shelter. You bring that dog home. You accept the responsibility for having a dog. You're going to care for it. You're going to give it what it needs. You're going to deal with any problems it brings you. This is take ownership. So this is why it's so powerful in business English. It means you accept a responsibility, or you accept a risk, you accept an error, a problem, a task, a project, a client, any type of responsibility. If you're accepting responsibility for something, you're taking ownership of it. But instead of just saying accept responsibility, that's very basic. Take ownership means, okay, this is mine. I got it. I'm going to take care of it. So this is very, very powerful business English. So for example, I'll take ownership of the client presentation. Okay, we need to put together a presentation for the client. I'll take ownership of the client presentation, which is so much more powerful than saying I accept responsibility for the client presentation, or I'll do the client presentation. No, I'll take ownership of this. So by you saying I'll take ownership of this means leave it with me. It will be taken care of. I've got it. It's very powerful business English. Or we need someone to take ownership of the onboarding process. So maybe your company's rapidly expanding. HR is flat out. Flat out means incredibly busy. No room for anything else. HR is flat out. They need someone to work with the onboarding process because they're overextended. And so you need to pull people from different departments. No problem. We need someone to take ownership of the onboarding process. Paul, can you do that for us? Yep, no problem. I'll take ownership of that, which means Paul will then take this responsibility of organizing the onboarding as his own. And this is beautiful. If there's any problems, we need someone to take ownership. Don't blame others. Don't point fingers. Take ownership. You make a mistake. I take full ownership of that mistake. My department takes ownership of this. We'll fix it. We'll resolve it. There's an issue, a problem. Remember, try not to say problem in business English. Swap out problem with issue. It's just a lot lighter. It means the same thing. So there's an issue. Jane took ownership of the issue and resolved it quickly. Oh, sorry, that was an error on my side. Sorry, that was a slip up. My department made that mistake. I take ownership and it will resolve it. So it just means you're taking something as your own, and it's incredibly powerful. I do hear students making some of these mistakes down below, which we're going to go through. You don't need to add an article. So sometimes students will say, take the ownership of, because ownership is a noun. Sometimes students will make the mistake of throwing in the article there. You do not need it. So you take ownership of something, not take the ownership of. Another one here is mixing up those prepositions. I'm doing an entire video. I haven't done it. I will do an entire video on dependent prepositions, because this is a huge part of business English grammar, or just regular English grammar. And if you're upper intermediate or advanced, even proficient, even C2 level, students still do make mistakes swapping out and using the wrong preposition. And there really are no rules, like I've said before. So if you're making these mistakes, you're not alone. You're in good company. A lot of advanced speakers do make this mistake, but bit by bit, you will clean up your usage, and the wrong preposition is the wrong grammar. So here, some people do say, I will take ownership on this task. No, you take ownership of something, not on. Take ownership of something. Okay, the last one here is touch base. And if you've been working in English, you probably do know this. However, touch base, sometimes students do use it incorrectly. So touch base is only to speak briefly with someone, or to connect with someone. I mean, it can be by messenger, it could be by Teams, it could be in person, it could be on the phone. We're not saying how we're connecting with someone, but it's connecting with someone briefly, and usually to check the progress of something, to share updates, or just to stay connected. So to touch base, a lot of students make the mistake of using touch base for a longer meeting, for a longer discussion. That's not what touch base is. Touch base is just, this comes from baseball. Okay, so when people are playing playing baseball, you hit the ball with the bat, and then you run, and you have to make sure your foot touches that base. You have that quick little connection, and then you've actually touched first base. Then you run and you touch second base and third base, and you slide into home. So this is where touch base comes from. It's very brief. So if you need to speak with someone, let's touch base later today. But make sure that conversation is very short. This is not a meeting. This is not a 1 hour meeting. This is not even a 30-minute discussion. This is very, very brief conversation, or check in with someone to talk about progress, have updates, any issues, or just to stay connected. Again, I hear a lot of students using this incorrectly when it's a long discussion or a long meeting. That's not touch base. Touch base is just quickly connect for whatever reason. Let me give you some examples here. Let's touch base tomorrow before the meeting, which just means I'll meet you 5 minutes before the meeting or an hour before the meeting. We'll talk for 5 minutes to go over our notes. Let's touch base. Or, have a great holiday. Let's touch base before you come back to work, which means in the weekend before you come back to work after your holiday, let's just connect briefly. I'll just share with you some updates. So very, very, very small. Or I need to touch base with the client today to confirm the date of the shipment. So I need to touch base with the client. Hey, Bob, are you shipping it on the 12th or on the 13th? The 12th. Great. Thank you. Bye. Phone call over. So touch base is a very, very quick little bit of connection for communication. Again, it could be via SMS, via WhatsApp, on Teams, on Slack, phone call, walk by someone's office, visit someone's office. It doesn't matter how you connect with them, but it's a brief connection with someone. A couple mistakes I hear here is people will make the base plural. So you don't say, let's touch bases next week, thinking that they have a base and I have a base. That's not what touch base is. Touch base is kind of to connect together. So you never make that plural. Let's touch base next week. Or I want to touch base, or it was great touching base with you yesterday. So it can just be one, past, present, or future, usually future, but it's just one connection, never bases. And again, you don't need to say, I'll touch base to someone. I'll touch base to the client next week. No, you touch base with someone. So again, those prepositions, they're everywhere. They're unavoidable. But I'll touch base with the client later. I'll touch base with you next week. Okay, now it's quiz time. I'm going to give you 10 sentences with the key word missing. You have to identify which of these words we've learned today, which of these 5 words go into each gap. I'll have the answers for you on the next page. Okay, hopefully you did well in that little quiz. If you didn't, no problem. Just go back to that word, rewatch it, make sure you've understood how, when, and where to use that term. And also in the comments, you can go and throw in a sentence using one of those terms. And I always look at my comments. I'll read your comment and I'll make sure that you're using it correctly. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you back next time for 5 essential business English terms. Thank you.